Good morning, everyone. Good Monday morning. It is March 1st, 2021. Welcome to the new day, new month, new week, and fresh perspectives. I am Brenda Baptiste, and we are coming to you live on air on MTV and across social media on all the various platforms who carry us. We'd like to say good morning to everyone who make the Perspectives link on a Monday, and looking forward to a great one with you today. And with no further ado, say good morning to our great talk panel, Senator Christopher Allie and Mr. Byron Campbell. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning, Brenda, and good morning to all our viewers and listeners. We're pleased to be back again. Start of March, month of March. It's a particularly nice month, I think.
Morning all. I'm just happy it's the 1st of March. You know, the year is moving so rapidly.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yes. Yeah. We're already in the last month of the first quarter. To business people and folks planning. That normally means a lot, kind of reviewing, where they are. So it's quite interesting.
Yes, it's going to be for in the first quarter for 2021, as Byron said, it is moving at a pace. And so for us in business, another milestone to check to see how we're going and how we're performing based on plans that have been made and so on. So yes, it is an area that we take like a setback and stock and see what's happening.
Well, as we're talking about the business part of it, of course, the Prime Minister would have in his first of all, poor audio, but I picked up that the statement regarding the economy and regarding the tourism sector, that we're looking at April as a period of a level of reopening. I think Sandals had made some statements about April, and the airlines, some British Airways, returning flights to Grenada in April, sometime in April.
Yeah.
I think that's a positive signal, but of course, there's a lot depending on that in terms of how the pandemic, how we manage.
Well, I think two interesting things there, Byron, is going to be the vaccine passport that we've talked about, and whether or not the country is going to, how they're going to treat vaccinated people coming in terms of dealing with quarantine. And that is part of it, because part of that issue is that if I'm vaccinated and I still have to quarantine for a week or more, then the holiday becomes almost non-existent. So I believe the government will have to look at policy changes or policy adjustments when we come to look at that and how it's going to impact. And I think the other major issue for us too is the return of SGU and SGU students. And what's going to happen as we get more into the vaccination aspect of nations and countries. So that looks positive for us in 2021. So bringing back the economy to some level of normalcy. I keep saying the SGU impact is so significant.
Right.
If we were to get 3,000 students back to SGU sometime later on this year or whenever, it's going to be great. Because the indirect spin-offs are
absolutely
amazing with the students coming back, their purchasing power, everything is absolutely critical for the economy to move in a certain direction. The farming community, the ability to serve, is significant. And to hear the Prime Minister talk about that is good, because you get a sense that because of how we have been performing with COVID, that there are going to be considerations to make adjustments so that livelihoods could return as quickly as possible. Because we really have some people struggling in tourism and
so it's a big deal. Chris, I just want to add that big deal. I took the vaccine last Thursday. I want to say that I'm here, from Thursday. I feel pretty good.
And I saw you running outside.
But I want to say for me, the 48 hours after that, I took half day work the next day. I felt a bit lacking some energy. A bit of just lacking energy, more or less. So you take it easy for 48 hours,
Okay.
But otherwise, I felt great.
So your only side effect was like low energy?
Low energy, you've been sluggish, your head feel a little heavy, something's happening. So you take it easy. You don't fight this, But within 48 hours, all system go, So, but it bothers me though, and I know we'll be talking about this today in length. The question of vaccine hesitancy is a big issue. I think it's bigger than we believe it is. My own estimates here, based on my interaction with the community, which I do a lot, is that vaccine hesitancy is over 50% and is higher in young people. So from that, I'm saying, what is the reason for that? We need to explore that. And in my view, we talked about this, remember last week with our minister, the question of a campaign. How do we influence positively our community that the vaccine is safe, and when we look at global issues in terms of, we have to look at the pandemic as a global matter, and not look at ourselves as a bubble and say, okay, we have no COVID, so I don't need to take it. Well, we're not in this by ourselves. We're here with the rest of the world. And if we're going to effect some reasonable control of the virus, that becomes absolutely necessary.
Well, it's a good thing you say that. I could throw this out this morning. MACP, which is the largest conglomerate in the region, announced last week that they were looking to purchase in excess of 6,000 plus vaccines once it becomes available. To vaccinate their staff across the region is 6,000 plus them family members. So I think it was an initiative and a statement put out to say to the communities and countries that if businesses look to target their staff to get them vaccinated, I'm talking about the hesitancy issue here now and buying into more, then probably that assists and can assist significantly with how it helps countries and people who have that hesitancy to say, the businesses are doing it, the employees are going along. Is it something that we could consider wider and get more businesses involved? Oh yes, there's a cost, and I mean, and some account is going to meet the cost. But the thing is it something we could take on as an initiative as a general private sector and see how we could assist the governments as well as our own people in dealing with it? Because one of the things the company been doing is putting out these videos by interviewing people like Professor Christine Carrington out of Trinidad, who is a virologist, and she spoke a lot about what was done, how the vaccine came about, and the safety issues with it, and the fact that it is better to be protected against severe illness and death than to have probably one or two side effects, as Byron is discussing.
Absolutely.
So I mean, a lot of that has to be, and what they did is that they took a lot of Caribbean specialists in the medical field to interview them to get their opinion. So it's something that probably we could consider. I mean, as we move along in this and different initiatives, as how we could get our people up to speed and to get them a little more positive on taking it. It's not enough to say, since we're small, we've been taking mum shots and measles shots and so on. Because there's so much information out there, and a lot of it is disinformation.
Lies.
Misinformation, a lot of misinformation. And the thing about the misinformation is, it was very, very interesting, because it really came home to me solidly last week as I interacted with people. And I mean, these are intelligent people. And basically, so Brenda, you take the vaccine yet? No, I'll do it sometime next week, I'm sure. Well, you taking that? Yeah. Why are you taking it? No, I don't think so. Why are you not taking it? And then they go, two people in particular, went into a litany of things as if they had studied it. A litany of items. In one case, it was more than 10. And I said, where you get that from? Listen to this. On Facebook. Where did you get that from? On Facebook. And I'm saying this to say that more and more people are getting their information from social media. But people more and more, it is also telling you that people believe every living thing they read on social media. How do you counteract that? You must be out there with proper information. The old traditional ways of getting information to people still works. And I'd just like to dovetail into the whole carnival thing the Prime Minister said. That there wouldn't be a normal carnival. Now, first of all, I could sit here and say we go to a carnival, like me, Brenda, saying, running my big mouth. Right? He is a leader of the country. He's the Prime Minister of the country. He has to be responsible for all his constituents. It means all of us, right? And he has to make decisions, as they seem to have been making during this pandemic, and they're not isolated, based on the current situation. The thing with COVID, a lot of things have to be made, decisions must be made on the current situation. So when he sits and he's asked the question about Carnival, and he says, Carnival, it won't be normal.
Yeah.
He never said no. He said it won't be normal. So somebody might say, okay, so why are you saying that in February? We still have a long way to go. Bearing in mind this vaccine thing, the Minister of Health, Prime Minister, said it again, that we need to get to 60%. Yeah? We're barely touching the surface.
Oh, yeah.
If we do not get to 30% inoculation, which big wedding we having, which carnival we having, which fete we're having, so all of these things go hand in hand. I'm saying all of this to say that we need to start working. We need to start working. The public education, let me tell you what really worked last week. When people saw people coming out with those images, I took the vaccine. When people saw people like themselves, their neighbors, their doctor, their community nurse, the lady down the road, people in business, when they saw those images on social media, it worked. It worked. We just need to take that and run with it and do more. I'm finding we are getting into a state where we're getting into a them and us kind of thing. People need more information about the vaccine. Yes, they have malicious people out there, but let's focus on those who need to know. And that is where we need to be heading. And that's what I want to say about
Brenda,
that.
I call it vaccine literacy. In that we need to inform the public about the facts, debunking the myths,
a big word as literacy.
Building confidence. But we have to
just
build
need to
confidence.
tell people.
We need to build confidence.
Yeah, we're not doing that.
And about the safety and the efficacy of the approved vaccines that we have. And going back to Carnival, Carnival takes more than 6 months to plan and execute. So if in March you're uncertain, I don't see how you're having Carnival. Certainly if it's going to be organized and structured in terms of the investment, in terms of bands and costuming and so forth.
Let's talk about that a little more, because that is going to affect the country in a way that I don't think we are taking on board enough. Because I believe how we see Carnival and how people are rationalizing Carnival is jump up. People are not linking Carnival to the economy. People are not linking Carnival to livelihoods. People are not linking Carnival to social wellness. So all of these things we need to think about, right? Jump up and mass on the street. I don't see us having bands on the street. I don't see that. But when you say Carnival, we're not having a normal Carnival. There are things that can happen within the space that we can enjoy. For instance, the Prime Minister of Trinidad said, absolutely no way, no Carnival, no Carnival. The promoters of Trinidad and Tobago the Promoters Association, one promoter wanted to host an event, I think went to the cabinet, presented, it was a couple, presented their proposal, other promoters got on board, and they said, listen, we can safely make this happen. These events we want to do happen at Naparima Bowl and at Queen's Hall. Gave their whole litany of plans. The Ministry of Health of Trinidad and Tobago came on board, gave conditions as to how they can have it, and certain things occurred. Now, I know promoters here and people here are sitting saying, well, the government ain't doing nothing and this one ain't doing nothing. Forget that. The Ministry of Health is not coming to anybody. They're not going to Wagiti, they're not going to Judah, they're not going to Steve Duncan, they're not going to Golden, whoever promoter, and say, so what are you doing? You have to go to them. This is what I would like to do. These are my plans. How can I be accommodated? And then they guide you. So we all need to take some responsibility. We all need to take some form of leadership. We need to start having the conversations, and we need to stop the all or nothing, because we are living in a current state where everything is being reinvented.
Okay, so I want to make two comments on that. First one is the issue of vaccines and availability is going to be an issue for us to get up to the point of 60 and 70%. I think the CARICOM, Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago recently, as head of CARICOM, spoke very decisively and about this access, and small countries like ours having access to vaccines as it ought to be because of what is happening internationally with it. So that is going to be an issue too as well as we move forward. Countries' ability to access the kind of vaccines that have been approved by WHO and PAO. So that's one. On the carnival issue, Brenda, I could tell you from where I sit and what I am told and know, there are discussions taking place.
They must.
The government, of course, has to deal with a fine balance between the economic. And the other thing we need to understand about Carnival, Carnival comes into effect under SMC by law. You have to launch Carnival and activate the laws to give the police the power to do certain things within the Carnival environment. Sure. When we talk about not a normal Carnival, I think they're referring to sponsored events, shows that fall under SMC that we normally associate with Carnival, which may not be happening in this type of Carnival.
Yes, because legally you can't think.
Discussions have taken place with promoters to understand the Carnival that went on in Trinidad and how this could be done or not done. But there's other consequences as well. If I decide to do a virtual event, say for what we want to do in August, the issue is I'm moving the crowd from an event, say in the stadium, and I'm sending the crowd home to you in your private residence, and people might get 20 or 30 people coming to an event to watch a virtual show, depending on, and then that happens. And so you have to really understand the public health consequences of changing.
So that's where we need their advice.
We
just can't be looking at roadblocks.
I'm not saying that, and I know those discussions are happening to see if it can happen, but there's the other aspect. We know in Grenada, jab is a big thing for us in Carnival.
Yeah.
As most people would say, regardless of whether they say Carnival or no Carnival, people are going to jab.
Yeah.
A different community.
We saw something last year.
Right. The issue is control, and if at all, if that happens, how we control it, and what rules we lay down. So if someone to come and say, man, you could play jab with me, but here, you have to be vaccinated, you have to have this, you have to do this, you have to do that.
All these things are available.
And,
we have so many tools in the toolkit.
Then,
let's not limit ourselves
you could then get into it.
and lock ourselves in.
I suspect the fact that the PM spoke about it is that discussions need to be had. I think they understand that some form of celebration
I
will
think
take
he
place.
was
clear.
I think he was clear, and for this time to be the approach he's taken is proper, is correct. He is the leader of the country. He has to say, because he was asked the question, so he can't ignore it, and he can't wait to the last minute. So he's basically building some sort of understand this is what is correct. He's saying it would. Of course, it has to. Nobody could sit down and say no, this and that, and nobody could say, well, we need to jump up because we broke. We need to balance the thing, and it needs to be reinvented. And as for the Spice Mass Corporation, their role might be different this time around. They may have to be guided while they manage what happens. But I really think the discussion and the understanding needs to come from the Ministry of Culture, the Spice Mass Corporation, the Cultural Foundation, the Ministry of Health, the promoters, the stakeholders, and have the discussions. Set up rules, set up parameters, and make it happen. Anyway, we got to take a quick break. When we come back, we have a special discussion this morning on vaccines and safety. And our special guest panelist is the president of SGU, Dr. G. Richard Oles. We'll be right back.
Dreaming of taking a break and escaping to an idyllic, happy place? Well, finding it does not require you to go too far. You already live in paradise. All it takes is for you to go out and discover it. Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique are blessed with a wide variety of accommodation that satisfy any taste and budget. Find the one that suits you and your family and treat yourself while having peace of mind that your health and safety is a priority. Knowing that we have gorgeous waterfalls, stunning beaches, and flavorful cuisine, let's be tourists in our own islands and enjoy paradise at home.
Are you gonna wear your mask today? You see everywhere you go. There are rules you got to follow, so don't you say COVID-19 will delay. Take the opportunity to save your community. Don't be that guy, put a mask on your face if you're heading outside. It's your life, my life, more lives will be taken if we don't try. If you feel any symptoms, call the hotline. Stay inside until you feel fine. 6 feet away every day. Keep COVID-19 far from work. Keep Grenada safe. Be COVID-19 smart.
Welcome back to Perspectives. Wherever you are joining us this morning, we welcome you. If you're just tuning in, good morning to you and thanks for joining us. This morning we have a special conversation. Of course, Grenada began its inoculation campaign in earnest against COVID-19 last week. And this morning we continue the awareness, and we think part of our role is to educate and inform our population as to what is happening. So we have a gentleman with us this morning who is an educator, a physician, and administrator during a distinguished career spanning more than 30 years. Dr. G. Richard Olds has served as the president of the St. George's University since August 2015. Prior to joining the SGU, Dr. Olds was the Vice Chancellor for Health Affairs and founding dean of the School of Medicine at the University of California, Riverside, which is UCR, in 2010. He joined UCR to lead the creation of a new school of medicine, the first LCME accredited medical school in California in more than 2 decades. Dr. Olds has over 100 peer-reviewed articles and book chapters primarily on international health topics. He was the foreign principal investigator of an NIH-funded tropical disease research center in the Philippines. He currently serves on a WHO expert panel and was chairman of the board of a large Gates Foundation project to deworm children in sub-Saharan Africa. He is also an infectious disease specialist. We say good morning to the president of St. George's University, who is waking up very early in Vermont in the United States to talk to us this morning. Good morning, Dr. G. Richard Olds, MD, MACP. Good morning, Dr. Olds.
Well, thank you. Good morning to all of you.
And again, thanks for waking up early.
No problem. It's still dark out here.
Well, we're sending some sunshine to you from the Spice Isle.
Well, thank you. I need it. Send a little warmth, too.
All right. Certainly. So, Dr. Olds, it is clear, it's kind of clear that the coronavirus vaccines are very folks are getting inoculated, but as more and more rolled out, you know, there's that sort of hesitancy from the population, and there's science and heart and feeling and conspiracy and all of that is having a bit of a tussles. The history of vaccines and with infectious disease controls, can you talk to us about that?
Well, the word vaccine itself comes from the very first vaccine that was ever developed which was really an observation that milkmaids who had been infected with a disease called cowpox, which, by the way, in Latin is vaccinia, so that's where the word vaccine comes from, were protected from getting smallpox, which was a fatal viral disease. And so the very first vaccinations done now, hundreds, maybe almost 1,000 years ago, started in China, was actually to immunize people with cowpox and protect them against smallpox. Now, over the years, we've developed more efficient vaccines and vaccines that can be mass produced. And right now, vaccines are probably the number one saver of lives in the world. Childhood vaccines against measles, mumps, rubella, vaccines against tuberculosis, vaccines we know against influenza, save literally millions of lives every year. And so vaccines, in contrast to, let's say, drugs, basically work by stimulating our body's own immune responses to protect us against infections. So in a sense, we're merely augmenting a system that we have inside our own bodies to protect us, particularly against a variety of viral illnesses. And COVID-19, of course, is a viral illness.
Okay. There's a lot of conversations about the length of time vaccines take to develop, and people are citing and stating, well, COVID-19, it seems like it was a quick process. How are vaccines developed? And talk to us about how the length of time these current vaccines on the market and address the concerns specifically that folks have.
Well, let's recognize that we did develop the vaccine very quickly, but there are really two factors that allowed us to do that. The first was we didn't start from square zero. It turns out that we've had past epidemics with other types of coronaviruses. You may recall the SARS virus. It never came to Grenada, but it was a worldwide epidemic of a different coronavirus. And then in the Middle East, there was a second, if you will, mini epidemic with what was called MERS. And more recently, you may recall the worldwide scare around Ebola, which is not a coronavirus, but is also an animal virus that made the species jump to humans. And in the process of trying to protect ourselves against those, if you will, smaller epidemics, we developed a lot of novel vaccine technology. And so when COVID-19 came along, we were already about halfway to creating a vaccine against that virus, in part because we had already had a head start with these other similar diseases. Now, the other reason, of course, that it happened so fast is when you basically get virtually all the scientists in the world and almost an unlimited supply of money, you'd be amazed how fast science can move. So the combination of those two things resulted not just in one vaccine, but there are about 7 vaccines now on the world's market. So that's amazingly productive use of about a year of vaccine development. Now, having said that, interestingly, all of the normal steps and safeguards that are used in developing vaccines have all been used for these. It's just that they were able to start about halfway down the process because of their past history, and with virtually unlimited funds, they were able to mobilize and organize double-blind placebo-controlled trials early on. So actually, the COVID-19 vaccines have probably we've had more experience with those vaccines, granted in a short period of time, than we've had with many of the newer vaccines that have been released in the last 10 years. So remember, there's now probably over 100,000 people that have been involved in double-blinded studies. That means that neither the people nor the doctors given the shots knew whether they were getting the actual vaccine or sugar water, and they followed those people very closely for months. And so we have that information, and by now, really, literally tens of millions of people have received these vaccines. So the good news is these vaccines are incredibly safe. Actually, among the safest vaccines that we use, and they're highly effective. So, the good news is, they did get them rather quickly, but they're very good vaccines, both from the major concerns people have. They're very safe and they work. So, I'm grateful that when our scientists put their minds to it, they can get this job done quickly.
Doc, thank you for that. I mean, one of the things that a lot of people who are hesitant to take the vaccine is to understand the safety of the vaccine and the history and how it was developed, because you hear a lot of discussion around longitudinal studies and possible side effects and so on. My question to you is to explain in simple terms, because a lot of people are talking about this mRNA platform used to develop some of these vaccines that we have versus the traditional way we do it, and people are worried that you're getting into the genes and genomes of people because of what it did with the proteins for this vaccine and so on. In simple terms, some people are worried that these things can interfere with your genetic makeup in your cells and cause side effects that we may not understand. Could you explain very simply for us that the safety around that issue compared to what we knew in the past?
So you mentioned the messenger RNA vaccines. Those are the ones that, the first two that actually came on the market along with the AstraZeneca vaccine. So that technology is relatively new, but let me try to explain how it works. Your body, all the genetic information that you have is kept in your genes, which are in molecules called DNA molecules in the nucleus of your cells. And ultimately, to produce a person, that has to be transformed into proteins. So how that works is that DNA never leaves the nucleus of the cell. They send a message out to the little factories in the cell that make proteins, and that message is called messenger RNA. And it is a template, basically a copy of the DNA material, and it diffuses out into the larger cell and attaches itself to little factories that make proteins called ribosomes. And proteins are created by amino acids linked one on after the other, like beads on a necklace, and they're created in these ribosomes. Now, the vaccine does a very clever thing. It actually introduces a special messenger RNA that encodes for a protein that would normally be produced by the virus. Not the virus itself. You only have one protein that the virus makes, but it's a very important protein. It's the protein that attaches to human cells. So if your body develops antibody against that particular protein, it blocks the attachment of the virus to human cells, so you can't infect human beings. That's how all the viruses work. All the viruses basically induce antibody against that coronavirus spike protein. Now, the nice thing about those messenger RNA vaccines is that when you think about it, the body doesn't want to make, have the same message running, years and years and days. So the life expectancy of those messenger RNA vaccine molecules is really short. It's a matter of days. So the odds that something is going to happen much later is extremely low, given the fact that what's being injected into people doesn't last in people more than a few days. And it doesn't, in contrast to other vaccines, and there are other vaccines that introduce genetic material. These messenger RNA vaccines don't do that. So let's take a look at what the actual evidence is. Now, those blinded studies are very important, and surprisingly, there was no difference in long-term side effects of people that got the vaccines versus those that got sugar water. That makes it a pretty darn safe. Now, it's only out about a year and a few months. That's as long as people have had that. But given the fact that the vaccines don't last in your body more than a few days, and already in blinded studies, there's no difference in long-term side effects at all, I would say these are likely to be extremely safe vaccines. Now, if you will, if there are statistical reactions, they occur immediately in the first day or so. And so that's what many people know are now getting the vaccines experience, but they tend to be minor problems. A sore arm, or maybe a low-grade fever for a day, feeling tired. I myself got my vaccine a couple of weeks ago, and I had a little sore arm, and I was sort of tired, but that was the extent of the reaction. But what people have to remember is Grenada has been blessed with really no COVID to speak of. I mean, there's no active cases on the island right now. Heck, the rest of the world wished they were Grenada, where, you know, literally thousands, hundreds of thousands of people have died and millions of people have been infected. So when people think about this, they think about, well, you know, I'm fine now, and if I get a shot, you know, am I going to get a sore arm? But what they should be worried about is the disease COVID-19 is a really bad thing to have. And it has long-term consequences. Already we know that people that survive from COVID-19 can have persistent symptoms that last for over a year. So the disease that this vaccine is very effective in preventing is a whole lot worse than any fear we might have about side effects of the vaccine, for which there's, by the way, no evidence that there's any long-term consequences of this vaccine.
And so, Doc, let me just shift another question to you on a slightly different area, but that has to deal with the way in which the virus itself is mutating, and given different strains and various variants that we know about now. We have the one from out of England. I didn't want to say England, but I can't remember the words, the numbers. Then we have the Brazilian one and the South African one. And the fact that, my question really is, the longer we take to inoculate nations with the vaccine, and the possibility of people getting infected and having mutations, it puts a strain on what we do. So the question is twofold. How effective do we see the current vaccines against these variants, and the possibility now of the longer we wait as nations and people to get vaccinated, of more variants developing that can cause more strain on the system?
Well, that's certainly true. So this is by the way, just from a technical standpoint, this is an RNA virus, COVID-19. And the RNA viruses make mistakes. You know, every million copies of the virus or so, it makes small mistakes. And so those are the mutations which lead to these variants. So the more the virus multiplies, the more it drives the creation of variants. So it's a race. You know, we'd like to eradicate COVID-19 from the human population. Remember, this is not a human virus. So we are attempting to do that, but the virus itself is mutating at a slow rate, and it's a race between can we get everyone vaccinated before a variant develops for which the vaccine is no longer effective. Now, having said that, the good news is that none of the variants that you described, and even some newer variants that are being discovered now in the United States, it appears that all of them are still prevented by the vaccines. Now, there are some clues that we may have to worry about this in the future. So, for instance, with some of the variants, the vaccines are not quite as effective. But let's talk about that effectiveness, because a lot of people misunderstand the statistics. So the vaccines, there are really three issues about the vaccines. The first is, does the vaccine prevent you from getting infected at all? Well, it reduces the likelihood that you're going to get infected. The AstraZeneca vaccine that's currently in Grenada, that's been well studied in England, and there's about a 70% reduction in the likelihood that you can get infected at all with the virus. Not 100%, 70%. And then most of the numbers that you quoted are the likelihood of getting sick with the virus, though that means that you both get the infection and then get sick as a result of that. And most of these vaccines, you know, are protective in the 90 percentile, meaning that if you vaccinate, let's say 1,000 people with sugar water and 1,000 people with a vaccine, 100 people will get sick that got the sugar water, and 5 people will get sick that got the vaccine. But the most important thing is, does it prevent people from getting sick, being put in the hospital, intensive care units, or dying? Because, of course, that's what we're really trying to prevent. You know, it'd be nice if nobody got sick, but what we really don't want is anybody to die. And all these vaccines are virtually universally protect people from dying. So that is a key statistic that sometimes gets lost. So currently, even with the new variants, these vaccines all protect people from dying. So that's good news. Now, in some cases, such as the AstraZeneca vaccines, they appear to be a little less effective in preventing people from getting sick at all, but still very effective. You know, they're still 50-60% effective. And we know that they prevent a lot of people from getting infected in the first place. Now, so the vaccines still work, but it's a race. We have to get as many people vaccinated as we can, not just in Grenada, but around the world, before the multiplication of this virus that's taking place in all the people that don't get vaccinated creates a mutant that gets around the vaccine, and then we're back in the race of developing a altered vaccine that will work against the new strain. Now, if you think about it, this is the same kind of race that takes place with influenza every single year. The influenza shot that you get every year is slightly different, and it's been modified every year to make up for mutations that have taken place in the last calendar year in the virus that circulates in humans. So right now, the vaccines all work, but here we got a race. It's mankind versus the virus, and we're only going to win this if we can get the vast majority of human beings to get vaccinated before the virus changes. Now,
So, Doc,
when that happens, I don't know, but we don't want to take that risk.
my final question to you on this is, with Johnson & Johnson vaccine now being approved in the US for use, and we know what's happening with AstraZeneca in terms of supply, Moderna to some extent, we have the Russian one, we have the Cuban one on final trials, we have the Chinese. What is your interpretation and estimation, being in the field for all these years, of the availability of these vaccines to small island states like Grenada, the OECS, the CARICOM area, where it appears to me that there is a real fight to get vaccines to these countries, and of course there's a cost issue as well as to how we can mitigate and get our populations up to the 60-70% level in terms of inoculation.
Now, I will say that I really don't know the statistics on the Cuban vaccine, so I'm not going to comment on that. But all the other vaccines, including the Russian vaccine, the Chinese vaccine, the ones you've all mentioned, all those vaccines work, and they all prevent people dying of the disease. So although that there are small differences between the vaccines, my own take is take the vaccine as soon as it's available. Remember that if you're vaccinated with one of the vaccines, you could always at a later point potentially be vaccinated with a different vaccine. And if variants develop that are less effective, I imagine that companies are already in the process of developing booster shots that would cover those variants. Now, you're correct. The big problem now is supply and demand. And you're fortunate in some ways that you have about 100,000 people that you've got to vaccinate. And there are already plans in the pipeline that the government is in the process of securing enough vaccine, for everybody on the island. Now, you have some vaccine now, and just as in the United States, where we've had a limited supply of the vaccine, we're going to have to vaccinate those people on the front line, and those people most likely to die from the virus first. But, as more vaccine becomes available, that we have to basically get it in the arms of people as fast as we can. Now, I believe that most of the vaccination in Grenada will probably be with the AstraZeneca vaccine. That would make sense given the close historic connection between Grenada and the United Kingdom, where it's made. And now that AstraZeneca vaccine is also the same vaccines being made in India. And I think that there's quite a few of those doses that have been secured. And both the Chinese and the Russian vaccine appear to be quite effective. And I believe that the government is looking into securing some of that. And I believe that the messenger RNA vaccines, that's the one actually I got the Moderna vaccine. Some of those will probably be available on the island as well in the future. So rather than get overly confused about the different vaccines, I think take the vaccine you got as quickly as you can. That's probably the best message I can be giving.
Doc, we have a major issue here of vaccine hesitancy. But I want to say too that here's the issue, that it is said that in the United States we have more Grenadians, or persons of Grenadian descent than more than our population. What I found out is that in Black America, only 42% of the population there will definitely or probably get the vaccine. And given our close relationship with America, particularly our nationals, and what we hear in there is that low acceptance rate is due in part to the historical instances, and we have the Tuskegee syphilis study, and in some respect continued racism within the healthcare system in the United States. How do we improve that messaging to have a higher level of vaccine acceptance in our islands?
Well, I think there's two factors here. The first is, in a sense, you're victims of your own success. There is a lot of vaccine hesitancy when nobody sees their friends and neighbors getting sick and dying. And, the government has actually been very effective in keeping the virus out of the country of Grenada. And, you don't have to look very far to see others that have been far less successful. Just look at Barbados, Trinidad, et cetera. Grenada has been very lucky that you've kept the virus out. And so, a lot of people haven't gotten sick and a lot of people haven't died. And in that setting, then people have a tendency to think this is not a real problem because they haven't seen it for themselves. Now, I really hope that people can realize that people are really dying in other places, and that you don't want to go through that misery to convince the population that getting a vaccine is a good idea, because that would require a whole lot of Grenadians to get sick and die before we do that. The second problem really is the issue that you brought up of the fact that vaccine hesitancy is not uniform across all patient groups. But let me also point out that COVID-19 is not uniform in its reaction to human populations. And in the United States, certainly, people of African descent and people who are of Hispanic descent actually are more susceptible to the virus, are more likely to get hospitalized, and are more likely to die. And that's a particular tragedy. So you can see that the hesitancy, and I understand the hesitancy, it's driven by a lot of factors, a lot of mistrust of the health profession over decades, some of it warranted, and the fact that there are many healthcare providers that don't look like them. And, they're suspicious of that. Now, Grenada is, I think, fortunate. The vast majority of physicians on Grenada are Grenadian, and they, I'm sure themselves, will be vaccinated. And we certainly at St. George's University are pushing hard to get everybody vaccinated as quickly as we can, including our students and faculty and staff, because we know that's the best way to protect everyone, not just you personally, but everybody on the island. And as we discussed about universal immunization, ultimately, it's protecting all of mankind. Now, we do have our hands full convincing people who haven't seen a lot of their neighbors get sick and dying, and who are intrinsically suspicious to actually get the vaccine. But I think all I can say is I myself have gotten the vaccine. Virtually everybody I know at St. George's University is getting the vaccine. And we're doing that not only to protect ourselves personally, but to protect our fellow Grenadians from having the same kind of misery that the United States has been experiencing for the last year.
I'm okay.
Dr. Holmes, in terms of side effects, you alluded to it earlier, and you included your own self. What do researchers know about any rare side effects there might be, if any?
Well, probably the most notable rare side effect is a allergic reaction called anaphylaxis, which is something that fortunately occurs within the first few minutes of getting the vaccine. Now, be honest with you, that reaction is very rare. In the messenger RNA vaccines, it's between 2 and 4 reactions per million shots, so pretty darn rare. And the AstraZeneca vaccine, which is right now being administered in Grenada, has an even lower incidence of that type of allergic reaction. Now, despite the fact it's a pretty significant reaction, it's immediately treatable with a shot of epinephrine, a so-called EpiPen. And that's why people who get the vaccine generally have to sit and wait for 15 minutes before they leave to make sure they don't have that rare allergic reaction. So that's the the documented significant rare reaction that takes place. Now, as far as long-term consequences are concerned, I already said that in blinded trials, which is really the best way to make that determination, there was no statistical difference in long-term reactions of any kind between those that got the vaccine and those that got sugar water. So, there's really no statistical long-term rare reaction with the vaccines at the moment. Now tens of millions of people are getting the vaccine. And so we've also had very few significant reactions besides those local reactions and immediate reactions I talked about. And so that should also reassure people that it's not like they're going to be the first one to get the vaccine. I mean, tens of millions of Americans have already gotten the vaccine. Tens of millions of Brits have already gotten the vaccine, Europeans. I mean, a lot of people have gotten these vaccines already. And honestly, they appear to be quite safe. And but remember, you should compare whatever the risk is, which is now just theoretical, with getting COVID-19 is really a terrible thing to do. And, I've lost people that I know from COVID-19, and I probably equally concerning is younger people that get sick, recover, but then have persistent cough or persistent confusion or other long-term side effects from having COVID-19. You don't want to have a lot of people on your island get infected with COVID-19 to drive home the point that everybody needs to be vaccinated. And remember, when people start coming back to the island, if there's a small number of people that are unvaccinated, this virus will find a way to find them. And that's because vaccinated people can still transmit the disease and still get infected. They themselves are not going to be hospitalized and die, but they could transmit it to other people. So if, let's say, 10% of the Grenadian population is unvaccinated, eventually this virus will find them. So, we don't want to leave particularly vulnerable members of our society unvaccinated, or the virus will find them and make them sick and could even kill them.
You spoke earlier about the way the virus was mutating when you were talking to Senator Allie, and you addressed the issue of the variants and so on, and you made the comparison with the flu shot and how it works and how it is changed every year to suit what's happening. Going down the road, do you envision a scenario, or is there any research available in the science community that the vaccines we're currently taking for COVID-19 would be like a yearly thing, like how we take the flu shots a year?
Well, I can tell you that already several of the vaccine companies are already working on booster shots that address these new variants. So, the scientific community, as soon as it became obvious that variants were an issue, have been working on how they would modify the current vaccines to address that. Remember that we only have been talking about variants relatively recently, but I'll use the United States as an example. The virus that came to the West Coast of the United States is the identical virus that was in China. But the COVID-19 virus that came to the East Coast, New York City, was actually a variant that changed in Southern Europe and was imported into New York from Europe. And so, that variant was more infectious than the original variant that was found in China. And so since it's more infectious, it quickly overwhelmed the older strain, if you will, and became the dominant strain. And now these three new strains that you've described, and there'll undoubtedly be others, are developing because they're more infectious. A few of them cause more severe disease. And of course, the concern is there's enough change in the molecule that we're using to vaccinate people, then the vaccines will be less effective. But when you refer to the influenza virus, it does the same thing. But the influenza virus probably mutates at a faster rate. And so I would imagine that sometime in the future, it wouldn't surprise me that we're going to have to get booster shots that are formulated with whatever the variants are that we're having to deal with at the time. but I doubt that it'll be on a yearly basis, but it could be. And the yearly basis would develop because we also know COVID-19 is somewhat seasonal, just like influenza is, meaning that there is an influenza season in North America. It's usually from early fall till the beginning of summer, and COVID-19 is likely to be seasonal as well. And so it is possible that we're going to have yearly booster shots that are formulated every year, just like influenza. But if that's what we have to do to prevent millions of people dying, I'm grateful that we would have that option.
And as you referenced earlier, and encourage folks to just take the vaccine, not getting too caught up in the brands of the vaccine. CNN is reporting Dr. Anthony Fauci, the U.S. top infectious disease expert, he urges Americans to take any of the 3 vaccines available to them. And he said, do not delay getting one vaccine over another. And he went on to say, I would take whatever vaccine would be available to me.
Well, I know Tony Fauci. I think I would take his advice. He is another infectious disease specialist. And I think that is the same advice I'd be giving. I can tell you all the differences because obviously I've read all the literature, but they all keep you from dying. That's a really good thing. And they all keep you from getting sick. That's another good thing. And it looks like they'll all decrease the likelihood that you can transmit the virus, which is helping protect everyone else on the island.
Thank you.
My last question to you, Doc, was on the issue of reinfection, and I know that is something that has come up recently. I was watching a clip with Professor Christine Carrington of virology out of Trinidad, and she was talking about the issue of reinfection, and that seems to be one of the things that's playing now. But my question to you is, with the vaccines that we have now, what is the extent of you being reinfected, knowing that the contagiousness is not addressed as it ought to? You could still transmit it. How severe could that impact what we're doing now in terms of the vaccine program?
All right, so the reinfection issue is principally, I didn't discuss this, but getting COVID-19 itself does induce a certain amount of protection from getting infected a second time. But that immunity, if you will, is not complete and it's short-lived. So when we talk about reinfection, those are generally people who have gotten COVID-19, recovered from COVID-19, and then got COVID-19 a second time. Now, in that setting, the COVID-19 illness that they get is often the same as they had before, and that's because of a peculiar thing of this virus. People that don't get very sick don't get much immunity. People that get real sick generally develop immunity that lasts longer. Now, having said all of that, if you have had COVID-19, and virtually no one in Grenada has, but if you had COVID-19, you should still get the vaccine. Now, you don't want to get it within 2 weeks of getting sick, but if you had it a month ago or so, you should still get the vaccine because the vaccine is much more effective in preventing recurrence of infection than natural infection is, because it's designed to be far more effective, and it is. So we don't know exactly how long natural immunity, meaning the immunity that comes from being infected in the first place, lasts, but it's probably 4 to 6 months. It may be a little longer in some people. We think that the vaccines probably work at least for a year, maybe longer. We haven't had them long enough to be absolutely certain, but the titers of neutralizing antibodies appear to be maintained for at least a year. So I think I would suggest that, yes, it's probably theoretically possible to get reinfected after being vaccinated, but the data would suggest that if you are reinfected, you're not likely, if it's vaccine-induced protection, you're not likely to get as sick. And that's based on what we know from a science standpoint. So all the more reason to get the vaccine. Even if you've had the virus, you should get the vaccine.
Thank you, Doc.
Thank you so much, Dr. Oles. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you for waking up early to have this conversation with us. We can keep you here forever. just picking your brain and giving us information that would
I'm
help.
more than happy to do that. Grenada is sort of like our second home. It matters a lot to us at SGU that everybody
Absolutely.
stays safe on the island.
But we're partners in this, so thank you so very much. Thank you so very much. Thank you a million times over for your support, of course, at SGU. And we can't wait to welcome you back.
Yeah, it's already the sun's come out. You can see snow on the ground.
So more sunshine, and looking forward to seeing you soon and speaking with you again. Thank you so much, and I want to thank your communications team at SGU, especially Kareed Clement, who made this happen for us. Thank you so very much. Bye-bye.
Bye. Whoa.
Yeah.
That was enlightening.
It was. It was.
Well, I believe, Brenda, you know, clips of this and sound bites of this need to be sent out nationally.
Yeah.
You know, because I think the doctor took time to explain it in a really simple language.
Yeah, that's how he speaks.
What is happening, and they need to be vaccinated, whether they had it or not. And of course, the level of protection it will give the country as a whole. And you know, our prior conversation about carnival, I mean, I think the doc really did an excellent job to talk about all the issues with the different vaccines,
Absolutely.
the efficacy or the effectiveness of the vaccine, the side effects.
Side effects.
Because you know, a lot of people have conversation about the side effects.
Yeah.
And I didn't know why you had to stay 15 minutes after you took the jab.
20 minutes.
20 minutes.
And
Yeah.
I mean, he told us,
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
20 minutes.
you know, I think there is so much information that came out there
Yeah.
that I think it's worthwhile that you know, perspectives, of course, first to the draw. Hopefully, we could get snippets of that out and help with the education aspect that we've been talking.
And I would like to encourage everyone else who have a platform to just serve the country in this way. You know, it's pointless getting into misinformation. You know, if you're a responsible entity, you know, just use your platform to do what needs to happen to get people like Dr. Oles. There are people here in Grenada. There's some people that have been vaccinated now. They'll probably be the best voices of how they feel, what happened. So, you know, it's relatable. Let's do that for us. The constant melee and confusion and contentiousness, it's not necessary. And we have to be very, very concerned about those among us who just don't know. So they need this information. So let's do it for that group.
Brenda, there's another point I want to make that regarding our rollout here, in terms of the facilities and the organization aspect of it, the doctors, the nurses, the organizations, how you were seated, how you attended to. I think this was excellent. It's quite an experience, actually. But I think there's another point there that as we roll this out, particularly in the rural communities, there are persons needing, it's like an election, you know, where parties go and get persons, the elderly and others. You know, we need to look at the logistics of it, how we get people through these facilities where the vaccination
once
will be
they
taking
start
place.
the mass
Precisely,
vaccination, right.
But the facilities, I was very impressed with it, and it gives you confidence once you got there.
Listen,
I think they said
every
we'll
time.
go to St. Andrews this week.
Yes,
They're at St. Andrews from today, and today and tomorrow, they're back at Radisson this morning from 9 o'clock, today and tomorrow. So those of you who want to go down to Radisson, please, today and tomorrow, for 2 days only for now, while we still have. And as Dr. Oles was speaking, coming through my feed as well, Antigua, the plane landed with their 40,000 AstraZeneca, and they're going to make 6,000 available to Grenada as a special gift.
Whoa.
So we have
And Dominica just extended
we have
his.
more on the way. Regarding I was going to say, regarding the facilities and the healthcare professionals, like every time I went through Facebook last week and I saw people just, you know, I even shared some on my own wall because I was just, you know, so moved. Everyone had that consistent message that it was so professional. The customer service was great. You know, people felt good. You know, the Minister of Health made himself available. He was there talking to people, you know, all of that kind of thing. And the nurses and the doctors and all team of professionals who went out and did this, everyone was so high in praise for them. And I felt good for them because that's like our 1%, because, you know, we always bashing them. So it felt so good. It felt so good. So to these people, I would really like to say thank you. Thank you for your service. Thank you for all you do and you continue to do. And, you know, only God knows.
Keep on
but
doing
thank you. Yeah, thank
keep
you.
on doing
Thank you. Thank you. Yep. Yep.
No,
Time to go.
Yeah, I took it again. I just want to. I took the vaccine. I feel great. I'm energized. I'm on the roll.
Yeah.
Listen,
And
now,
that's a good testimonial
I
right
feel
there.
I feel a vaccine have a little feel good thing in it because it's like you know.
Because you can't. I mean, vaccine, but not by itself. I mean, the protocols, the face mask. We could do this, you know.
Yeah,
really.
we can. We can.
But we need
can.
a concerted effort, and we have to reach the persons out there that are hesitant to take the
I
vaccine.
mean, as I keep saying, there's not a lot of us, as the doc alluded to, it's just 100,000 of us there.
That's it.
Yeah.
You know, so
And a
if we
big
get
point
6
he
to-
made, that about is part of our own success that we react.
Yes.
We are
I
victims
thought
of
that was
our own
interesting.
success.
We're not
That's
seeing
true.
the casualties
That's
and
true.
the pain.
Yeah, because
You
we
know?
didn't see enough people die and so on. So we just
not
Yeah,
close
but
to us.
you hear a lot of that when they go to Fet and Bartway and do their thing. They say,
Yeah.
well, we have COVID here, what's the problem? So
course.
that is
It's true.
a good
Oh,
example
wait,
of
yeah.
victims of our own success as well.
Anywho's, we gotta go. Thank you so much, everyone who tuned in, those who carried the program. We'd like to thank you for that, MTV. We'd like to say happy birthday to our producer, Kishan Thomas.
Wow.
It's his birthday today. Happy
Yeah, man.
birthday, Kishan.
Yeah.
And Senator Allie celebrating a birthday coming up sometime this week. So we'd like to say early happy birthday to you.
The March people, the March
Happy
people.
birthday to you. That's our program for this week. Go on out, fresh week, fresh month, fresh perspectives, fresh information about the vaccines. Go on out and get yours. Until next Monday, I'm Brenda Baptiste. Bye-bye.